Maria Dalisay and Daniel Lim, two lives from completely different worlds, became the center of a deadly secret that no one saw coming. What began as a simple employment arrangement turned into a dangerous affair, a hidden pregnancy, and ultimately a shocking murder that exposed the dark side of wealth, power, and betrayal in the heart of Singapore. Maria Dalisay never imagined her life would take her thousands of miles away from home. She grew up in a small village in the Philippines where the air smelled of seawater and the nights were filled with the sound of crickets. Her family depended on her. Her father was sick, her siblings were still in school, and her mother sold vegetables in the market. Maria knew she had no choice but to leave. She promised herself she would work hard in Singapore and send money back every month. The moment she boarded the plane, she carried not only her luggage but the weight of her family's survival. The Lims hired her almost immediately after she arrived. Their mansion looked like something from a magazine cover. White marble floors, expensive furniture, and large glass windows overlooking a perfect garden. Everything inside felt like a world far from the struggling life she left behind. Mr. and Mrs. Lim were known for their wealth and status. They lived in a gated neighborhood where most residents appeared to be protected by money and influence. To Maria, they seemed powerful, and even though she felt grateful for the job, she also felt intimidated. Mrs. Lim often traveled for business, sometimes being away for weeks. Her absence turned the home into a quiet, controlled environment where Maria worked without interruption. Daniel Lim became the only adult presence in the house. He was a man who seemed to have everything: a successful business, a respected name, and a reputation for kindness. He complimented Maria for her work, a simple gesture that meant more than he probably intended. At first, she believed he was simply a polite employer, but each small moment grew into something more noticeable and unexpected. Daniel began offering her food whenever she finished her chores. He asked about her family and listened when she spoke. No one had ever cared about her life like that. Back in her village, survival was the only topic that mattered. In Singapore, she felt seen. Maria convinced herself that he understood her struggles. The more attention he paid to her, the more she allowed herself to believe she had finally escaped the loneliness she always carried. Soon, Daniel started giving her small gifts: a bracelet, a book, a new pair of shoes. Maria told herself they meant nothing. She did not want to believe there was something dangerous forming beneath the surface. She tried to keep distance, but she couldn't ignore how her heart reacted. Her co-workers from neighboring homes whispered stories about wealthy employers and maids. Some said these relationships always ended badly. Maria ignored the warnings. She believed her story was different. Weeks turned into months, and the house took on a strange rhythm. Mrs. Lim remained absent. Daniel became more present. Maria continued working as if nothing had changed, but inside, everything was changing. She looked at her future differently. She imagined stability, maybe even a family of her own. For the first time in her life, she saw hope. But hope can be a dangerous thing when it grows in a place filled with secrets. And in the Lim household, something dark had already begun to take shape in silence, hidden behind the walls of the mansion where Maria thought she was safe. 2 days after Maria disappeared, the city woke up to shocking headlines that spread across Singapore like wildfire. Early morning, joggers discovered the body of a young woman lying near a quiet forested area in Bukit Timah. The location was peaceful, surrounded by tall trees and narrow trails used by hikers, but that morning it became the center of a crime scene. The police quickly arrived and covered the area with yellow tape. Officers began collecting evidence, photographing the body, and sealing off every possible path leading to the location. The uniform she wore was enough for neighbors to identify her. It belonged to the Lim household. The victim was Maria Dalisay. News outlets instantly picked up the story. Reporters stationed themselves near the crime scene. Cameras flashed, microphones were raised, and questions filled the air. Who was she? How did she end up in such a secluded place? Why did she still have her maid's uniform on? The public wanted answers, but none came quickly. Meanwhile, the police confirmed that Maria had been 3 months pregnant, which heightened the attention even more. This was no longer just a tragic death. It was a possible murder involving an unborn child. Detectives began retracing Maria's last known movements. They interviewed the neighbors, other domestic workers, and security guards stationed at the entrance of the community. Everyone shared the same confusing fact: Maria had not seemed distressed or in danger during her last days. She never complained about work, never hinted about leaving, and never took personal belongings with her. Her room back at the Lim mansion was untouched, her clothes still hanging neatly in the closet, and her salary was untouched. These small details suggested she hadn't planned to run away or escape anything. Something had interrupted her life suddenly. Mrs. Lim's statement added more confusion. She told the police that she had fired Maria a week earlier after accusing her of stealing jewelry from the house. According to her, Maria left without packing because she wanted to avoid confrontation. However, investigators questioned the story because there were no missing items recorded and no previous reports of theft. Maria never withdrew large amounts of money, and she didn't buy a plane ticket home. She had even recently visited a nearby pharmacy and purchased vitamins for her pregnancy. That revealed one thing clearly: she had been planning for her future, not her disappearance. The community began forming their own theories. Some believed that Maria had been the victim of human trafficking or an employer cover-up. Others suspected foul play from someone close to the Lim family. Online forums turned the case into a mystery everyone wanted to solve. The Singaporean authorities were pressured to reveal more information, and they promised that no detail would be ignored. Police narrowed in on the Lim family as their main focus. Daniel was questioned repeatedly. His story shifted in small but suspicious ways. At first, he claimed he barely interacted with Maria. Later, he admitted they spoke occasionally. Then he changed his story again and said he had helped her with household duties. Every inconsistency made him look more suspicious. Mrs. Lim's version of events also felt incomplete and distant. She seemed more concerned with protecting her reputation than finding the truth about Maria's death. As detectives dug deeper, they realized the simple surface of the case hid a complex secret. Something within the walls of the Lim household was wrong. The investigation was no longer just about a young maid found dead. It became a story of lies, hidden motives, and a tragedy that started long before Maria's body was discovered in the forest. The truth was tangled, and each new revelation pushed the police further into a dark path no one expected. Police pressure intensified as investigators searched every corner of the Lim mansion for clues. The real breakthrough came when they examined the hidden security system installed throughout the property. Daniel had never mentioned these cameras during questioning. The footage showed more than just daily routines. Investigators discovered recordings from several nights when Daniel and Maria entered his bedroom together. The meetings were frequent and always late. The affair was no longer a rumor whispered among neighbors and maids. It was undeniable fact backed by video evidence. The police gained a clearer picture of Maria's final months in the Lim household. As the investigation continued, Mrs. Lim became a central figure. She appeared calm in public, but her answers felt rehearsed. She explained that she had no idea about the affair and that she had fired Maria only out of suspicion. Yet her claim contrasted sharply with what forensic investigators noticed. Maria's belongings were neatly arranged, untouched, and still in place. If she had been fired, there should have been signs of packing or urgency. Instead, everything looked as if she was still living there. That raised more questions about Mrs. Lim's involvement. Daniel's life began to unravel under scrutiny. Detectives uncovered large cash withdrawals from his bank account made on the night Maria vanished. When asked about the money, he gave vague explanations and changed his story several times. At one point, he claimed he paid for a private medical procedure for Maria. Later, he changed his answer and said the money was for a business expense. Every shift in his story made him look more like someone hiding the truth. A surprising clue appeared when police learned about an abandoned construction project on the Lim property. Workers had been hired by Daniel to dig a deep pit for what he said was a garden water feature. But immediately after Maria disappeared, Daniel canceled the project and paid the workers extra to leave. Investigators contacted the laborers who confirmed the sudden cancellation and the strange instructions Daniel gave them. He insisted that the work should stop immediately and refused to explain why. Police returned to the site for a deeper search. Though they found no body there, they collected soil samples and potential trace evidence. The discovery only strengthened their suspicion that Maria's death was connected to that area. The detectives knew they were dealing with someone who had planned each step carefully and confidently. Meanwhile, the public reaction grew intense. Singaporeans were horrified by the developing story. It was no longer viewed as an unfortunate tragedy. It became a case that exposed the imbalance between employers and domestic workers. The truth was becoming clearer that Maria hadn't just been a maid. She was a woman who got caught in a dangerous situation with powerful people who believed they could control every outcome. Media outlets continued digging into Daniel's past. Journalists uncovered that he had previous relationships outside his marriage. None had become public until now. Police realized that Maria wasn't the first woman Daniel had taken advantage of, but she was the one whose involvement had turned into a deadly secret. The threads finally began to tie together. The affair, the construction pit, the missing money, and the conflicting stories all pointed toward a dark conclusion. Investigators knew they were getting closer to uncovering the truth about what really happened on the night Maria disappeared. But the final revelation was more shocking than anyone imagined. Forensics shifted the entire direction of the investigation when they examined the shoes Daniel wore on the night Maria disappeared. The soles of those expensive leather shoes carried particles of soil that matched samples from the abandoned construction site on his property. It was the first concrete physical link between Daniel and an area already suspected to be part of the crime. The detectives knew that the connection was not accidental. The soil on Maria's clothing was the same. This discovery turned speculation into a near certainty. Daniel had been there at the same time Maria was taken from the house. Combined with the camera evidence and the unexplained money withdrawals, the case against him became stronger. Police brought Daniel in again and interrogated him longer than before. His confidence began fading as investigators presented details he had not expected them to find. The pressure of the questioning room and the hours of silence forced him to shift his story once again. He admitted that he wanted the affair to end. He told the officers he had been overwhelmed and frightened of losing his family, but no one believed that fear alone could explain Maria's death. He described the situation as a mistake, an emotional disaster, but each new version only made him sound more guilty. While the interrogation continued, forensic teams rechecked the mansion. They analyzed every hallway, every room, and every hidden camera. They found no weapon and no sign of struggle inside the home. That detail changed everything. If the murder did not happen inside the mansion and there was no visible violence, then the crime must have been pre-planned. There was no random outburst or sudden fight. Something much darker had happened. It suggested a controlled situation, one that did not involve force, that raised a terrifying possibility for the investigators. Maria may have been drugged or sedated before being taken from the house. The case took another unexpected turn when Daniel's financial records were examined more closely. Investigators found an insurance policy he had secretly taken out in Maria's name. The document looked like it belonged to her, but experts confirmed her signature was forged. If she died, Daniel stood to receive a large payout. It was the most disturbing discovery so far. It changed the motive entirely. The affair was not the reason for the murder. The pregnancy was not the problem. Daniel had turned Maria into a target because she represented money and a new escape. Mrs. Lim's role suddenly became clearer. She had known about the affair for months, but she had not harmed Maria. She had hired lawyers and was quietly preparing for divorce. Her goal was separation, not violence. The truth finally surfaced. It was Daniel who had everything to gain and everything to lose. He had used his power to hide the affair and silence Maria. The police arrested him, and the news shocked everyone. Reporters filmed the moment he was taken away. His reputation collapsed in seconds. What was once a respected businessman now looked like a man who believed he could buy freedom and erase consequences. The public watched as the case exposed the worst side of privilege. Every new fact revealed how far Daniel had been willing to go to protect his image and profit from someone who trusted him. The city waited for the trial, knowing the darkest truths were still ahead. During the trial, Daniel entered the courtroom with a calm expression, but his eyes betrayed the panic he was trying to hide. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The prosecutors presented a timeline of his movements that aligned precisely with Maria's disappearance. They described how he had withdrawn money, canceled the construction project, and deleted messages from his phone. Witnesses from the neighborhood testified about the unusual activity on the night Maria vanished. The once respected businessman now faced a courtroom filled with journalists, neighbors, and angry observers who wanted justice. Forensic experts explained their findings in detail. Maria had been sedated before her death, which confirmed that she had been unable to resist or fight back. The cause was not a sudden attack or a crime of passion. It was a planned killing. The traces of sedative found in her system matched medication Daniel had recently purchased under a fake prescription. This eliminated the possibility that he acted in fear or impulse. It proved calculation and strategy. The prosecutors described a man who valued control and saw Maria as a problem to be eliminated. Digital evidence provided the final blow to Daniel's defense. Investigators had searched his email accounts and uncovered a chain of conversations with another woman he had been seeing. In those messages, he talked about wanting a future free from responsibility and complications. He complained about his marriage, his business, and the chaos Maria's pregnancy created. He had even mentioned solving the problem permanently. Weeks before Maria's death, the jury listened in silence as the messages were read aloud. It was clear that Maria had never been the cause of his downfall. She had simply become the victim of his desire for control and a new life. The trial lasted several weeks. Every day added new evidence and new testimony that shaped the true picture of what happened. Mrs. Lim also took the witness stand. Her voice was steady, but her words carried pain. She described how she discovered the affair and how she had prepared for divorce. She had even planned to leave Singapore after the separation. She denied every rumor about her involvement in Maria's death. She explained that she never wished harm on the young maid because Maria had also been manipulated by Daniel. In the end, she became another victim of his selfish choices, though in a different way. Daniel's defense attempted to argue that he acted under emotional distress, that he was afraid his life would collapse, but the evidence was too strong. The jury rejected every excuse. They found him guilty of murder, forgery, and financial fraud. Daniel was sentenced to life in prison. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief and sorrow. Maria's family, who had flown from the Philippines to attend the trial, held each other tightly. They had traveled a long distance to fight for justice, and they finally received it. After the sentencing, the Lim mansion was abandoned. No one wanted to live in a house with such a grim history. Mrs. Lim left Singapore and was never seen in public again. The tragedy changed her life forever. Maria's body was returned to her hometown. The village gathered to honor her. They placed flowers on her grave and built a small memorial statue to remind everyone of the cost of trust, vulnerability, and hidden cruelty. The case became one of the most shocking in Singapore's modern history. People discussed it for years, reminding themselves that behind wealth and luxury, hidden darkness can grow unnoticed. Maria's story was shared in newspapers, documentaries, and online discussions. It became a warning about power, manipulation, and the fragile lives of workers who leave home seeking hope. The memory of Maria remained a symbol of courage and tragedy, an innocent woman who crossed paths with someone willing to destroy anything to protect his own future.